Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Big news, breaking news. Former president pleads not guilty to crimes. I had to start there. I had to, because that's all I saw today. Breaking news. Is it really breaking? I think it's kind of broken news. But I saw it, the emails, breaking news, breaking news, breaking news. Everyone had to be first. And, I could have got up this morning, written the email, right when I woke up, gone back to bed early, and just put it out for, later this afternoon. And it would have been, because guess what? No surprises in Donald Trump making his trek, pleading not guilty. They didn't photograph him, which, I got to tell you, I wanted to see a mugshot, but hey, his presidential portrait, good enough. Good enough. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the opening talking about it because everybody's talking about it. And we will get to it in a little bit. But I got to tell you, I'm focused on the Hunter Biden thing. I hadn't really cared about it before. Because, look, no one has drawn that straight line from Burisma, from Hunter Biden to Joe. There's been no quid pro quo. There's no smoking gun. There's no there. And the more the Republicans keep throwing this up and keep having hearings, the more it kind of, major thud, a giant nothing burger, time and time again. And I know, they've got their narrative that they're playing, and their narrative is, Joe Biden fired that prosecutor so Burisma would benefit. The testimony didn't go there, but that didn't stop Republicans from still saying it. And this again is another one of these moments where they spin their own narrative, they spin their alternative reality, and they keep hammering on that alternative reality, because they understand if they say something enough, if they repeat it often enough, if they go over it and over and over and regurgitate it time and time again, people are going to buy it. Because it's, well, everyone's saying it. It must be true. All of the right-wing, blabosphere is regurgitating this stuff because that's what they do. That's why they built it. And it's masterful. It works. It's convinced us that we shouldn't tax rich people. It's convinced us that, corporate America gives us wonderful things because they're benevolent, and we should be thankful. It's convinced us that privatization is better than us doing things for ourselves. It's really masterful how they've created this narrative and this alternative world that they just keep, free trade is wonderful. It's great for working people. It's going to create so many jobs in third world countries for poverty wages. But my mind was focused on the Archer testimony. And as I was reading through the transcripts early this morning, because I was bored, and that's what I do when I'm bored, I started coming across some of the comments that Archer was making. Because, again, you look at what Comer and the committee keep throwing out. It's a lot of BS. But this Archer was talking about, did he believe that Burisma wanted this Shokin fired? And he's like, no, just the opposite. He said that the narrative that he had was that this guy Shokin was good for Burisma. Just the opposite of what Republicans are throwing out there. And the more this guy talked, the more you got the sense that this wasn't a quid pro quo scenario. This wasn't a business deal at all. This was a father concerned about his son. And the more I read through this, the more my mind kept going to this place and trying to put myself in Joe Biden's position. I've got 3 kids. They are growing up. They are becoming adults. I worry about them every day. Some are making decisions I'm okay with. Some maybe not so much. put yourself in Biden's position during the time that all of this stuff is supposed to be going on. His son Beau dies. He's got this other kid who's got all kinds of drug and alcohol problems. He's worried about this kid, and he calls every day. And I'm going through this, and I'm going, he calls every day? That doesn't sound like a business deal to me. That sounds like a father worried that his son, who has addiction problems, maybe fallen off the wagon, maybe needs some encouragement, maybe needs someone, there every day, even out of his busy schedule of, being a well-known politician, still taking time to worry about his kid. And I got to tell you, this image of Joe Biden, because look, I think of him as Uncle Joe. I think of him as a good, decent man. I may not have always agreed with his policies, and I may not have always agreed with the votes that he took while he was in the Senate. But I've never viewed him as someone terrible. I've always viewed him as that decent family man, that Uncle Joe character, that person that we all knew that cared about people. And this is what came out of that testimony for me. Now, I know Comer and the Republicans and the rest of them, they want to try and figure out how to muddy the line to make it seem like those phone calls were all about, hey, we got a big deal here, 10% for the big guy. But I don't see it that way at all. I see it as this guy is someone who's truly caring about his kid and wants to know what's going on. Now, is the kid, doing what people do when they have a name, when they have the invisible capital of a name? Yeah. He puts things on speakerphone at a dinner meeting with a bunch of people. Hey, look who's on the phone with me. My dad. Is that shocking? Is that surprising? No. And they're going to try and turn that into somehow Joe Biden benefited from this. They haven't proven that. They haven't shown that. And I said from the beginning, there's nothing here for me until you can show me that direct line, that direct quid pro quo. Because from the beginning, I said, this is probably what it was. Kids, not all the brightest. He's cashing in on the Biden name and using it as well. Roger Clinton did, as Ronald Reagan did. Who was it? Michael Reagan, the guy, the talk show guy. He made a whole career out of the fact that, hey, that's my dad from another mother. So same thing with the Bushes, same thing with Roger Clinton, same thing with Billy Carter. I mean, you can go back through all of this. People use that invisible capital. Donald Trump. Without Fred Trump, without that Trump name, he doesn't get into the rooms he gets into. Jared Kushner. Now, my mind did go to Jared Kushner. My mind did go to the Trump kids. Now, I don't know why we're not investigating that. You got a Senator Elizabeth Warren who's saying we probably should be. But this is one of those things where understand what the whole Hunter Biden thing is really about. It's not about actual crimes. It's about the illusion. It's about giving the base the outrage candy that they need so that they can put things on the same level. Well, Joe Biden, did this thing that we've imagined, and that's the exact same thing as, well, these 78 charges and 560 years of crimes that Trump's done. So it's a wash. That's the argument. And I've had this thrown at me a couple of times where you just go, no, that's not how that works. That's not how it goes. It's like the other day I was reading a Jonathan Chait piece over at the New York Times, where he's putting, and this is just absolutely mind-blowing to me. He's putting Hunter Biden and Clarence Thomas on the teeter-totter of justice, and they're equal. Somehow in his mind, Clarence Thomas and his crimes somehow equal to whatever Hunter Biden's being accused of. Now, let's start with the most obvious. Hunter Biden doesn't actually work for the government. Doesn't have an official title, doesn't have an office, doesn't collect a paycheck, isn't going to get a pension, doesn't get health care from the federal government, gets nothing. All he's got is he's got his father's cell phone. That's it. He can call dad every once in a while. Hey, how's the thing going? His father's going to call him. But no official power. Now, you throw in all of the Trump kids who did work in the administration. You throw in Jared Kushner, who did work in the administration, got $2 billion from the Saudis. You throw in Clarence Thomas, who is a sitting Supreme Court justice. There are massive differences, but my friends on the right are going to go, no, see? They both did bad things. They did things. So it's equal. And you go, no, it's not equal. It's never going to be equal. But understand, the outrage merchants, they need to keep pushing that narrative so that they can go, but. They can motorboat all day long, but. And they do it so well. You know, because anytime you bring up something with Trump, but Hillary. What do you mean, but Hillary? Trump had 4 years to go after Hillary. Didn't do it. Why? Nothing there. Didn't have a case. Sorry. Didn't have a case. Now, the response I get back from people is, well, you know, Donald Trump was above the fray. He was above it. Now, remember, this is the guy who ran a campaign on lock her up. It was one of his main campaign promises. You know, it's what people wanted on his side of the aisle. This would have been a true I did what I said moment, but no, he chose not to as the narrative because for the good of the country, I was told. He chose to put down the partisan divide. And, you know, my response is always, you know, in what world are you finding yourself? And what is the substance in which you're ingesting that makes you so deluded? So the breaking news, Trump pled not guilty. We're going to see where this takes us. I do believe all of these trials have to be out in front. Do I like the fact that we're where we are? No. But Trump did this to himself. At the end of the day, no matter what everyone else says, Trump did this to himself. And this most recent indictment, all Republicans doing it to him. All of them. So that narrative that they spin, this is Joe Biden's fault and Joe Biden's DOJ and Joe Biden's people. No, these are all Republicans. All of them. And what the January 6th Commission did, what they did really, really well, they had no Democrats talking about it. It was all Republicans. And I think you're going to see more of that. But I want to hear your thoughts. Are you surprised by the big indictment? Are you surprised that he showed up? I would have liked to see the mugshot. That would have been interesting. But he was fingerprinted. But we'll get more to that later. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around to listen to The Rick Smith Show.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'll tell you, the reality is the more we find out about this, the more you're going to have, wide awakenings. wide awakenings of, for me, the Giuliani story is just, wow. Rudy, remember when Rudy was remember when he was America's mayor? Remember when he was the guy? Everyone, thought he was the guy? Wow, Rudy. Leaky Rudy. Let's go to the phones. We got Alice on line one. Alice, how art thou this fine day?
I am very well, thank you so much. May blessings fall upon you. So, I was with a right-wing friend of mine today, and a number of interesting topics came up, including what was going on. And the only thing I can tell you, Rick, is I'm just wondering what alternative reality that they live in. Because between hearing, Donald did this and that, the other, he's being persecuted because he's a Republican and did so much, and, they're all victims.
Nonsense.
And the illegal immigrants, and then I was told that I was crazy because in a desire to change the topic before I lost my temper, I brought up something about driver's license, and which I should have just kept my mouth shut, because then that led to, all the illegal immigrants getting driver's license, and that's why we had a real ID. And I was like, what really aggravates me is they call it a real ID, considering you get it from the same government agency. But
here's the thing. Did you,
in a bid to move things along?
When you talk to these people about
nowhere.
Real ID, Alice, when you bring this up to them, who do they think pushed that through? And are they?
That was the Democrats, don't you know? Because I even brought that up. So I was just looking at them like.
No, it was James Sensenbrenner who did it in the middle of the night in a defense appropriation bill, if I remember right. I mean, it was something that got snuck in because everyone was against it. Conservatives, liberals, everyone was against it. I my state of Pennsylvania, I'm still fighting against it, although we don't have a choice. So it's amazing to me to hear Republicans are going, no, we're all in favor of real ID to stop those illegals.
Yeah, I'm just going, oh my God. But, and they're also voting for DeSantis if Trump doesn't run. And I thought, oh my God. So, thankfully the visit ended shortly, and, that was that. But what I wanted to really say was, do we really think that Trump's going to be able to keep his mouth shut like the magistrate ordered him to?
No.
I think we should. I think we should start taking bets on.
And I don't want him to. I want him to continue to lean in. I want him to continue to be tweeting crazy stuff out. I want him to be everything that he is always, because he's digging himself a deeper hole.
I'm agreeing with you, but I'm still thinking we ought to just set up like a pool and say, okay, it's going to be this date, because there's no way that he's going to be able to keep his mouth shut. But you have a good evening.
Thanks, Alice. I appreciate it. No, maybe a national lottery. Maybe this is how we figure out how to do, solve that national debt problem. Maybe, who knows? Maybe this is one of the ways we go about ensuring that we can pay back some of the money that we borrowed during the Trump years. I don't know. The money that we gave away in massive tax breaks to the very wealthy. Just a thought. Now, here's the thing. Don't point at me and go, well, Democrats run up that too. Yeah, they do, because they're digging out of the holes left by Republicans. And look, I am a borrow and spend liberal. I will wear that proudly. I will borrow money when it's at almost 0% interest rates and spend it on infrastructure and education and things that are going to make us better. Without question, any day of the week, every day of the week. That makes sense. Now, what I won't do is I won't do what Trump and my Republican friends did and go, oh yeah, we're going to borrow a whole bunch of money and we're just going to give it away to our rich buddies. And they're going to pocket it. Yeah, see, that doesn't fly for me. Doesn't fly for me. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Today is a very important day in history. Today is the day the Patco workers went on strike. You may remember this. 1981 was the year. I remember it. I was in high school at the time, and I remember this going going, this is a big deal. 13,000 workers hit the picket line, members of the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, otherwise known as PATCO. Reagan came out and said, if you don't go back to work in 48 hours, I'm firing a lot of you. And thus the shot heard across the boardroom. The beginning of open season on organized labor and on organized workers. This is pretty much everyone agrees this was the moment that it was pedal to the metal. There had been the attacks on workers, for a decade before. They were slowly, thanks to the Powell memo and, corporate America's coming together and colluding, going, hey, we got to stop this organized labor stuff. They're sucking up too much of our profits. That's our money, darn it. And because of this, we saw a major downturn in organized labor and the power of workers to demand better wages, hours, and conditions. And look, these folks were fighting for things that we need. Shorter work weeks, fighting against automation, fighting against deregulation, fighting against inflation. These are people who are fighting the fight that we should be fighting today. But the fact of the matter is, lots of lessons to be learned in this PATCO strike, because, as I said, they were fighting in the moment to make sure that their wages weren't eaten away by inflation. The 70s were a high inflation period. My grandfather, as I said, in 1975 got 3 raises because of his cost of living adjustment in his contract. Made sure that their wages didn't get eroded by inflation. And the PATCO workers wanted the same kind of thing. They wanted a 32-hour work week. They wanted, better working conditions, better equipment to do their jobs. And they wanted to ensure that their jobs wouldn't be automated and they'd be done away with. And this is kind of a moment for us to look back and say, the fight that they were fighting back then is the fight we should be fighting today, to ensure that wages are reasonable for working people to be able to have a decent life, to ensure that working conditions are safe so people are both mentally, physically, and socially okay, that they go home in the same position that they came to work in. I don't think that's too much to ask. And overall, that we don't allow the pendulum to swing way to the far side of corporate America. And that's where we are right now. Corporate power is the behemoth. And what we've seen recently, especially at UPS with the Teamsters, threatening to strike some 350,000 workers, it's one of these things where you go, reality, workers need to start standing up and taking to the streets. They need to start doing what these PATCO workers did. Now understand, this is the backdoorness of our Republican friends. Because as the story was explained to me, the PATCO union supported Reagan in 1980 for president under the idea that when they went on strike, he would secure for them the things that they wanted and needed. That was already there. He was going to be their guy, made the promises. Yeah, I'm a former union president. I'm going to be there for you. And he was there for them, all right. He was there to not just fire them, but blacklist them for life from any federal employment forever. That's how Republicans treat working people. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1981. That was the day 13,000 workers in the Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, or PATCO, went out on strike. Highly stressed workers had been driven to nervous exhaustion by long hours, problematic technology, and brutal management. They wanted better pay and working conditions and a 32-hour work week. PATCO workers had proven that militancy bred victories throughout the 1970s. But public sector employers went on the offensive as the decade drew to a close. By the time Ronald Reagan was elected to office, automation, deregulation, and inflation had taken its toll. As Joseph McCartan details in his book Collision Course, controllers found new technology unreliable. They experienced, on average, a computer outage a day in critical moments of takeoffs and landings. As well, the Airline Deregulation Act and the Civil Service Reform Act became law in October 1978, serving to restrict union rights and worsen working conditions. By the late 1970s, inflation had tripled. Federal workers, unlike those in the private sector, lacked any COLA protections. Emboldened by their skill level, solidarity, and previous victories, the controllers walked. Invoking Taft-Hartley, President Reagan issued a 48-hour back-to-work ultimatum. In a historic move, he fired the strikers, jailed their leaders, and forced costly injunctions that spelled doom for the union and the labor movement. Many labor activists had hoped the Teamsters and machinists would walk out in support. Instead, the strike was a pivotal moment for labor. It ushered in an era of unprecedented attacks not seen since the 1930s. As Robert Weir notes, Patco's defeat touched off a new wave of downsizing, decertification, and concession strikes. The labor movement continues to suffer its impact today.
Little known fact, a leading cause of death in Texas is Governor Greg Abbott. Yes, by intentional actions and deliberate inactions, Abbott has used his gubernatorial policies to kill thousands of Texans, including his calculated refusal to extend health care to millions of poor Texans, including nearly 1 million children. His intentional denial of water breaks for outdoor workers broiling under this year's 100-degree-plus heat dome. His lethal deregulation of utilities, causing the state power grid to collapse for days in the deep freeze of 2021, with hundreds dying for lack of heat and water. And his shameful prioritizing of gun extremism over the lives of school children. These people are not dying accidentally, but are victims of Abbott's premeditated policies and political ambition. Consider his silly scheme of throwing $9.5 billion of Texas taxpayers' money into the ditch of his highly ballyhooed border security PR show. Grandiosely branded Operation Lone Star, it has posed Generalissimo Abbott as a right-wing border hero. Some hero, he has stretched miles of razor wire underwater in the Rio Grande, slashing the flesh of migrant families and trapping babies and pregnant women in the coils. And Abbott's state troopers have been commanded to shove exhausted and injured refugees back into the river toward Mexico. As one appalled trooper says, "We have stepped over a line into the inhumane." This willful cruelty is made ridiculous by the fact that Abbott's militaristic power play has totally failed to deter migration. After all, these families are fleeing for their lives and future, so he can wrap all of Texas in razor wire and they will still come and find a way in. This is Jim Hightower saying Abbott can kill lots of them, but he can't kill the human spirit.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, not shocking. There's nothing breaking news today about Trump pleading not guilty. But what is interesting is the charges. I mean, for me, the fact that there's no seditious conspiracy, there's no treason, there's none of the stuff, the big ticket stuff that you would have expected, because you got a couple of people who in that crowd of, 1,078 is Trump's number of the number of people who have come through because of January 6th. He is now number 1,078, I believe. But here to share some thoughts on the indictments and maybe give us some of the prosecutor view of how this might go down. I've asked our good friend, former Alabama Senator Doug Jones, to come talk with us. Doug, thanks for taking time for us.
Always great to be with you, Rick. How you doing tonight?
I am good. I'm looking at this, and there's so many questions here. There's so much, so much on this plate. I want to get into the charges though right away because, they're for most people. I don't think most people know what these charges are. Can you explain, in legal terms that someone like me could understand what these charges are and what they mean?
Sure. Well, look, they're actually fairly simple. I mean, when you really go down to it, and people need to think back about the January 6th committee and all the evidence that they've heard from so many people, because so much of this evidence, Rick, is going to be the same witnesses, the same folks, the Cassie Hutchinsons, the Mike Pences of the world, other people who came forward and talked about those November, December meetings, and what Eastman and Clark and all these and Giuliani said and did. So what has been charged was what is, I think, the most obvious charges out of this, in the sense of the evidence, not what you could, incitement of riot and sedition and all, but the most obvious ones, after you heard the January 6th committee, is a conspiracy to obstruct a proceeding. That is the main thing that we go here. Count one is, let's see what it says. Violation of Title 18 is 371. That's just basically defrauding the United States. Count two is a part and parcel of that. That is a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding. That is simply obstructing and impeding the proceeding to certify the certification of the electoral vote. Count three is the attempt to corruptly obstruct, impede an official proceeding. Everything that they're doing, including the fourth one, and that's one that I want to talk about a little bit more in a second if we get a chance, and that's the one to deny people their rights, the right to vote and to have their votes counted. An interesting theory on that I think has ramifications for the future. But the other three are clearly directed at every effort that Trump and his unnamed co-conspirators went through to try to stop the certification of the election. You got to remember, Rick, you don't have to succeed in doing that, although they did for a period of a number of hours. Everything they did led to that insurrection, led to a work stoppage of the Senate and the Congress.
Yep.
And ultimately, it was not until the wee hours of the morning of January 7th where they finally certified the election. So it's really when two people or more agree to commit a criminal act and take steps in furtherance of that act. And it's laid out pretty well in this indictment.
Yeah, and look, if they could have gotten to Mike Pence and they could have hung him in the gallows there, they would have succeeded.
They would have ultimately, again, there was an obstruction. It just wasn't a permanent obstruction. Okay, they didn't just completely stop it but they did obstruct it. They delayed it, and they succeeded. I don't want people to think that what is alleged was a conspiracy that the objects didn't succeed. The objects of this conspiracy actually did succeed for a period of time. They ultimately weren't successful, but they did succeed for a period of time.
No, it's incredible. And, because as I was reading the charges initially, I'm going, well, this doesn't sound all that bad until you start looking at that. These are serious. They're still serious crimes. They're not what I had hoped for. They're not the seditious conspiracy and the ones that I think, most lay lawyers, would go, that's what we should be going after. But this is serious stuff that could end up with serious time. So of the cases that are out there, because, the classified documents thing is one, the DA in Manhattan is another, and then this, because we've got, 3 not guilty pleas so far, which as a prosecutor do you think is the most damning for the former president?
Well, look, there's a difference, I guess, between most damning and most likely to succeed. I think the most likely to succeed is a far different calculation that's very difficult, I think, to say right now, because it involves jury selections, it involves discovery and the challenge of evidence that we haven't seen yet. Remember, January 6th, we didn't see the defendant, Donald Trump, and his lawyers challenging the evidence, cross-examining witnesses and all. So in terms of success, it's very difficult. But in my view, the most damning thing here is in my view, clearly the indictment that came out this week. I mean, that goes directly. And again, every defendant is presumed not guilty. And that's a legal presumption, Rick. That's not something to be taken lightly, okay? But the charges go directly at the heart of our democracy. And what these folks were doing, if a jury believes, is to subvert that democratic process, just to completely destroy our institutions of government in order for Donald Trump to stay in power. And that's a real threat to our democracy. So in terms of damning, I think clearly this is the most damning allegations that we have seen.
No, because I mean the reality is this is a conspiracy. Because I remember saying again, I'm not a lawyer, but I've watched a lot on TV, and you hear about the RICO Act and all of this stuff with all of this conspiracy stuff. It seems like this was going on. You had all these unnamed co-conspirators. You had people saying, "Hey, we can use the military to put down any protests against the insurrection by using the Insurrection Act." Hey, we've got this all these alternative electors that we've now created, and we've brought the web on this is enormous. And you've got the guy who came up with the theory of Pence can just not certify, and we can change it. I mean, it really is remarkable.
But here's an interesting thing though, Rick, and we don't know what all the evidence that the special counsel has gathered on that, but yes, we have seen those allegations. We've seen all that. But in order for there to be a charge of any conspiracy like this, they have to do more than just simply talk about it in the theory. Hey, we might can do this. We might can do that. What about seizing the machines like Mike Flint talked about? You can throw out all kind of ideas, but you've got to take steps in furtherance of the conspiracy. Those are called overt acts. And you've got to take a couple of overt acts in furtherance of that conspiracy in order to meet the elements of the crime, to prevent the very thing that Donald Trump is saying, to prevent First Amendment rights from being criminalized, where somebody just sits around and says, damn, I think we should just seize the voting machines. Yeah, well, I do too. Well, if they don't do anything in furtherance of that, no crime has been committed.
Right.
Okay. And I think that there is, what you're seeing here is the old line prosecutor rule is to go with your strength, go with what is simple, what people can understand, and it carries significant penalties to it. Yeah. Make no mistake, it carries significant penalties to it.
No, this is one of those things where you talk about the overt acts. I looked at January 6th. I know that a number of states sent fake electors. Someone put all this together. In my state of Pennsylvania, there were a number of people, notable people, which is former Congress people, very, very high level Republican operatives who put their name on a document. Now, of course, here in our state had a caveat that, well, if the official ones aren't, we're the other ones. But still, there was some coordination that went into this.
And remember, the Attorney General of Michigan has brought a lawsuit already. Fake electors. We still are looking at a fake elector lawsuit and potential criminal charges in Georgia. I'm not sure what's going on in Pennsylvania, but I think Arizona has begun to look at that now. So we may not see the ending of that. But here's the other piece of that, is that you also may not see any direct involvement by Donald Trump in those, which would not, my guess is that they would have charged Trump in Michigan if they'd have had direct information about that. So what was going on at the time was just stunning. And it also is, I think, a very serious foreshadowing of issues that we're going to face in 2024.
No, it really is. I mean, if you'd have gone to Netflix and written this script, they'd have laughed you, 15 years ago, they'd have laughed you right out of the place. To think that we're in the moment that we're in. I mean, you were a federal prosecutor, right?
Yep.
Could you ever have imagined, us indicting a president? Look, there are a lot of times where you look back at a president's time in office and you go, oh, they did this. I look at the Reagan years and Iran-Contra and a bunch of other things. And you go, how did they not get indicted? But we've always gone, well, let sleeping dogs lie. I look at this guy, the crimes are so egregious and he's so... the documents thing is a perfect example for me. Had he just given them back, I think it would have ended right there. But it was all of the stuff that went along with it, the bravado, I just think he is his own worst enemy, and I hope he violates the judge's order, and I hope he keeps talking because we need that.
Rick, he said something today. I I wasn't sure if it was before or after, but he said to put it in his context, he was saying that he was being persecuted, going political enemies, political folks going after their opposition, whatever, weaponizing. That was his context. But he did use a phrase. He said, this should not be happening in the United States. And I agree with that. The United States of America should never been put in a position where we are now, where a man who held the highest office in this country is now facing a series of very, very serious indictments for his own conduct. And the people that are testifying, those that are bringing forth this evidence, the prosecutors are either independent or they're in various jurisdictions. But the prosecutors can't testify, Rick. That's the thing. Every lawyer says what they say is not evidence. Their arguments, nothing is evidence. The only evidence are going to be the documents and the witnesses. And we've seen the witnesses in January 6th, and it was Trump's own inner circle. So, yes, it's one thing I completely agree, not with his context, but the United States of America should never have been in this position.
No, I agree with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with former Alabama Senator Doug Jones, talking about the breaking news. Trump pled not guilty again today. But I want to get your thoughts on Representative Mike Waltz, the Republican from Florida, who he believes that Trump should get special consideration, because he was president. And this kind of stuff shouldn't be prosecuted for a former president because, he should get special consideration. I mean, isn't this the ultimate in no one's above the law? Isn't this kind of that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, getting elected president does not give one a get out of jail free card at all. And it should not. Imagine what can happen if someone committed offenses. What would happen if all of a sudden the Constitution said if you're the president of the United States, you are just basically immune from state or federal criminal activity. Good Lord.
Well, but here's the thing, Doug. I mean, if let's say he wins in 2024, and there is a chance that could happen, can't he just pardon himself? Can't he stop the DOJ from pursuing? I mean, couldn't he do exactly what you're saying?
Well, no, he can't give himself immunity to not prosecute. There's a difference between abusing your pardon privilege and just immunity from prosecution, which is what Waltz was saying. Yes, I think there's a legal question about that, but quite frankly, it appears if you just read the letter of the Constitution, he could probably do that, at least for the federal violations. If he gets convicted in New York, if he happens to get convicted, if charges are brought in the state of Georgia, that doesn't apply to him. He cannot pardon himself for anything but federal crimes, not state crimes.
So, I've been reading a lot about this, and you as a former prosecutor, maybe you understand the defense a little bit better than I do. They're talking about a delusion defense. What are they talking about when they say, Trump's the legal team's teasing out this delusion defense? Is it just that he's not all right there? He has a different belief, and you can't prosecute him for this. How does that work?
Well, it is basically saying he is so narcissistic that he was delusional in believing that he actually won the election. Because there were, according to the indictment and evidence that we saw from January 6th, there were any number of his inner circle that was telling him he lost the election. The vice president apparently was telling him he lost it. His White House counsel was. But then you had a group of lawyers, which by the way, Rick, is another whole embarrassment for the legal profession, that all of these unindicted co-conspirators are damn lawyers. I mean, we catch enough crap, okay? And and here we've got this literally wacko legal theories, but they present some delusional defense that he really believed it. I think that only can go so far. And according to the indictment, he may have acknowledged he lost several times, and it gets to a point to where the delusional defense of whatever they're trying to say, there is, anyone would be delusional to believe it. Okay.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is the weird part of this, and I agree with you. I don't know how you can look at 2020 and think that Trump won, yet, and I point to this CNN poll that finds 69% of Republicans and Republican-leaning voters say Joe Biden's win in 2020 was not legitimate. And that's up from 63% last year. So it's only, it seems like maybe Trump's delusional. Seems like 69% of the Republican Party, they're coming along for the trip.
Well, remember, I think that's true, but there's a part of that I think you got to separate a candidate, a president who has really spent $1 gazillion, had the best, pollsters around with him, had filed 60 lawsuits, okay, that he is monitoring every day, versus people who are just feeding off of Fox News, feeding off of headlines and Breitbart and Steve Bannon and those kind of folks. And they don't want to believe that their guy lost. They don't want to believe that Donald Trump lost. They want to believe that there had to be some other reason that he lost. And they've not done the due diligence. They've not done the work. They hear Democrats saying XYZ, and they see certain folks in the media, but they don't believe that. But there's a big difference from where Donald Trump is sitting in the Oval Office, getting this information real time, every day, very specific, getting updates on the lawsuits, what's being said, what's being done, okay, and literally all of this crazy stuff just being thrown at him. And sure, I am absolutely convinced he wanted to believe him, but there were certain things that for instance, that they wanted to do, but they decided not to do because of the, Jeffrey Clark was saying he should be the attorney general. Okay. And everybody else is saying, if that happens, everybody resigns. So that didn't happen. So it's not like he was totally irrational. And I think you're going to see some of that too. Yeah. And I think that there will be some evidence where he acknowledged, at least from what I see in the indictment, there will be some testimony that he at least acknowledged that he lost it. And here's two things, Rick, and I don't want to dominate this, but I want you to remember two things. One, in the first impeachment, in the call to Zelensky, he was trying to get Zelensky to open up a criminal investigation. And what he was saying is, just open it up. All you got to do is open it up. We'll take it from there. Okay. In other words, let me run with whatever that means. Truth be damned. Okay. Validity be damned. In this case, he said the same thing. He was telling Bill Barr, just say it's corrupt, and me and my folks in the Congress will take it from there. That to me is such an admission that folks that are his supporters and people in Congress ought to look at and say, this guy's been playing us.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point.
Just playing us. He had planned on playing us all along, and for his own personal benefit.
I got to tell you, the hope is that all of this comes out, as I've been saying all along through all of this. It's, for me, what's important is what is said under oath when they go into that courtroom with the judge and the book in the hand and all of that. Not what Rudy Giuliani said in the parking lot of the Four Seasons Landscaping Company, but what actually gets presented into evidence. Lastly, right, before I let you go, I got to get your thoughts on, you were a senator from Alabama. I hated to see you lose to the dumbest guy in the U.S. Senate. This thing that he's dug in on in screwing our military. And I got to tell you, it makes no sense to me why he would take such a hard line on getting the promotions to our military folks, leaving the Marine Corps without a commandant, all kinds of craziness. This makes no sense to me. Can you explain it?
No, I can't. Other than his grandstanding and playing political games with it, he seems to enjoy the limelight, despite the fact that he's catching hell for it. It is unpatriotic. It is un-American. It is an assault on the military in general, but it more particularly is an assault on the women in the military and the spouses of military men. It is one of those things that is it is unlike anything that we've had in our history. Rick, a lot of people don't really, I think, fully understand that so many generals and flag officers in our military have to be confirmed by the United States Senate. It's not just something that happens within the Army. They have to be confirmed. And people are retiring. They have to leave the military at a certain point. And so those are vacancies. Those generals, let's say a 4-star general, well, that cannot be filled right now by the 3-star general that is set to move up. And that means that the 2-star general that's waiting to be a 3-star general can't move up. The 1-star can't move up. Folks cannot. It's like I said this a minute ago when I was doing something on social media. It's like a log jam. You got a couple of logs rolling down the river. They get to a narrow spot and they jam up. Well, all of a sudden, everything that's coming behind them gets backed up and backed up and backed up, and pretty soon it's like a beaver dam that the river is not functioning the way it's supposed to be. That's what's happening here, and he's doing it because of the Department of Defense's stand that they took following the Dobbs decision, that basically said if you are a woman in the military, or if you are the spouse, a female spouse, and you like access to reproductive services, including abortion, that are not provided in the state we have assigned you, okay? Not the state of your choice, but the state that we've assigned you. We will pay, we'll give you paid leave. We will pay for your travel. We will not pay for the services. And there's a big difference. This is not against the law, despite what Tuberville says, but it is affecting morale. It is affecting the ability to retain lawyers. It is setting back our ability to recruit women in our military. It's setting it back years because we've worked so hard to get women into the military. It is unpatriotic. And here's the thing. Remember, Rick, you're old enough, I think, to remember Walter Cronkite during the Iranian hostage crisis, okay? Yep. Well, every sign off on the news during the Iranian hostage crisis back in the late 70s and through 1980, Walter Cronkite would say, and that's the way it is, day 147 of the Iranian hostage crisis. Well, we're starting something on social media where every day we're going to give the number of days that Tuberville is having his un-American assault on our military. Today is day 147. Tomorrow we'll do something for day 148. Well, we also got a petition. I got a petition going on my PAC, the Right Side of History PAC, that we're going to deliver to him when they come back in September. It's unbelievable.
It really is. And I guess if there's a positive thing that comes out of this, we now all know that, all these years that we weren't paying attention, the Senate actually has a job that it does and has done very well until this moment, until you put stupid people into positions of power, and it's infuriating. But Doug, I appreciate
it in a bipartisan way, Rick. Done it in a bipartisan, unanimous consent way.
Absolutely, it was nonpartisan, and yet here we are. But Doug, I appreciate the time. As always, incredible stuff. I wish you the best. I'm gonna at some point say you need to be running for Senate to get that guy out, but not now. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
All right, buddy. Take care.
Good stuff. Our good friend Doug Jones. Seriously, I don't know, Alabama, how you took probably the smartest guy I know and replaced him with the dumbest guy. But that's what you did. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Climate change shifted the heat.
Man-made climate change made record hot July 3 times more likely, new study finds.
That can lead to over 2 billion hours of labor lost per year just in the United States.
Extreme heat is also extremely costly for business. Plus,
customers are facing another rate increase. It's the third this year.
America's first new nuclear reactor in years finally starts operations in Georgia with higher costs for rate ratepayers.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
A new reactor at a new nuclear power plant in Georgia is now producing energy that could soon be used to power your home. It's an exciting step.
Not the words that I would use to describe it. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as delighted as I am about a new nuclear reactor in Georgia, I guess we have to start with the nuclear reactor in the sky that is causing all kinds of problems across this earth.
Sure, we can put it that way. About 80% of humanity experienced unusually hot temperatures during July. That was the hottest month in recorded history, and human-caused climate change was responsible for most of it. That's according to a new study by nonprofit data firm Climate Central. The researchers say more than 6.5 billion people experienced climate change intensified extreme heat in July 2023, and man-made global warming made those extreme temperatures at least 3 times more likely.
And they are still experiencing that heat right now.
Indeed. Even though it is winter in the southern hemisphere, parts of Chile hit a record 102 degrees this week.
102 degrees Fahrenheit in winter?
Yes. Beijing became the newest area deluged by record-breaking rainfall, the remnants of Super Typhoon Doksuri, one of the most intense storms ever to hit China, dumped nearly 2.5 feet of rain over 5 days in the Beijing region, an all-time high in at least 140 years of record-keeping. That triggered catastrophic flooding, crippling the city, killing at least 21 people, with dozens still missing. Climate scientists say global warming is turbocharging extreme rains around the world because a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. Extreme weather is extremely expensive, according to a new assessment by global reinsurance giant Munich Re. In just the first half of 2023, globally, disasters of all kinds caused more than $110 billion in economic losses. But the U.S. alone makes up more than a third of those disaster losses this year so far. A different study finds that the prolonged extreme heat has hit small business owners exceptionally hard. According to a new report by the small business payroll company Homebase, the heat forced many small businesses to close early in July due to fewer customers and to protect employees. That reduced paid working hours for employees. The company warned that extended dangerous temperatures may reshape consumer behavior.
Wow, that would be something that a political party that cares about small businesses would want to take action and do something about, right?
We can now add oil refineries to the list of fossil fuel infrastructure struggling amid record-shattering heat. Refineries in Texas and Louisiana have been forced to cut back operations as a safety measure because they're not designed to operate above 95 degrees. That has helped spike gas prices around the world. They've reached their highest levels this year so far in the United States.
So fossil fuels increase the heat. That shuts down the refineries, which raises the profits for the fossil fuel companies.
Pretty neat, huh?
Sweet deal.
In other news, the Biden administration held an oil lease auction as required by law, this time in Nevada, but nobody came. 0 oil companies bid in the Bureau of Land Management's lease sale. The bust underscored calls from conservationists to focus on abundant renewable energy in the state and phase out oil production. Finally, electric utility Georgia Power began commercial operation at one of 2 large new nuclear reactors at the Vogtle plant this week after years of delays, design and construction missteps, and massive cost overruns. The first newly built U.S. reactor to come online in decades, it was supposed to be up and running in 2016, but the cost of the reactors has more than doubled to more than $30 billion. While the new reactor will generate zero emissions electricity for an estimated 500,000 homes and businesses, Georgia Power has asked for the 3rd rate increase in a year on customers to pay for the cost overruns of Plant Vogtle.
So more dangerous and more expensive.
Yeah.
The plan is sound. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks, Mastodons, and website formerly known as Twitter at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the other day I asked a simple question. I worked for a company for 20 years that on Monday went out of business. They shut the doors. In fact, there's a truck across the entrance of the place that I worked for a number of years. They laid off all the employees, all 30,000 nationwide. And I asked the simple question, how is it that Yellow Freight's stock was on January 27th, it was 49 cents. And the day they announced they're closing the doors and firing all the people and you know, I guess eventually going to liquidate, the stock price goes through the roof. And as I said, look, it's completely not how I believe the system was created or should work. But I said I was going to get somebody to explain it to me, and I have done just that. I've asked our good friend Morris Pearl to come give us some thoughts. He's the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, the website. Morris, thanks for taking time for me.
Hey, it's great to be on your show, Rick. Thanks for having me.
So walk me through this. Explain to me how this is possible, and then we can talk about all the other stuff. I'm stuck on how is it possible that a company goes out of business as we're filing bankruptcy, we fired all our employees, we've shut all the lights off, everything's dark, we're not picking up anything, we're done, and the stock price quadruples, you know, whatever 5 times is in the aftermath. How is that possible?
They went from shipping about 1 million less than truckload shipments a month to 0. But about 10% of their revenue, Rick, about 10% of their revenue came from this third-party logistics company they own called Yellow Logistics. That part is still going. And there's a couple of guys called MFN Partners, a hedge fund based in downtown Boston that's buying the company up. They currently own over 42% of Yellow from a very low percentage a week or two ago. And I think what they're looking for is that third-party logistics company that's still running with non-union people running it, that does like making all the arrangements for people who want to send stuff from someplace to someplace else, like both the local and the long distance. I mean, I don't really know much about trucking and third-party logistics, but that's kind of what they're doing. And I think that company that has about $500 million a year in revenue, these hedge fund guys in Boston might think is worth $400 million bucks. Because that's about what the whole company is worth right now. And they're buying Yellow maybe to get that piece of it.
Interesting.
So as much as I can figure out, this part's actually making money. And even at the current stock price of $4 or $5 a share, that means the whole company, Yellow, is worth about $200 million bucks. So not very huge in the grand scheme of things. You know, they used to make $5 billion a year in actual shipping, down to 0 now.
Yeah, no. What Yellow figured out how to do, and look, I on Monday I talked about Yellow's history of everything that it touches, it kills, and this time it touched itself and ended up killing itself. But you know, I said, look, they figured out how to take the number 1 company in the country back in 2005, which was Roadway Express, and number 2 company, which was Yellow Freight. They figured out how to take the number 1 and number 2 companies and then make them the number 3 company. Which again, that's the power of Bill Zollers and the management there. How you take 1 and 2 and make it 3. I'm not sure how that works.
Well, I think they were trying to be the low cost guy and compete on price. And that meant not investing, to make a profit, charging lower price than other guys. They had to pay less.
Yeah, well, what they were trying to do, and what the argument was back when the buyout happened, is they were going to make a super union company. They were going to take over what was left of the National Master Freight Agreement and have one behemoth. Because they were the number one and number two companies, and the government allowed it, which I think was stupid. But they were going to be this huge carrier, and they were going to be everything to everyone. And they thought that was going to give them the ability to use those synergy words and getting rid of excess redundancies and those corporate speak, which meant gutting a number of workers and streamlining their system. And it just didn't work because some shippers hated roadway and some shippers hated yellow. So if you showed up with a tractor that said roadway and a trailer that said yellow, both companies told you to get out of there and they were looking for somebody else. They didn't think this through really well.
A lot of people just think short term and they don't think beyond, can I borrow some money and load the company up with debt, withdraw some of the cash, and maybe it'll work. And it more often than not doesn't.
So what happens to all this debt? I mean, you're the Wall Street guy. The government's the Trump administration gave them $700 million that evidently, we the taxpayers have 30% stake. What happens when this bankruptcy happens? Who's going to get stiffed?
Well, currently the whole you can buy the entire company for about $400 million, even though they borrowed $700 million just a couple of years ago. And will they pay off the government? Probably not. I mean, I'm not a lawyer and bankruptcy expert, but I would not be counting on that money if I was a creditor.
Yeah, and this is why, again, I come back to, the good thing is that the company never held the pension. The workers' pensions, the union holds their pensions, so the guys will at least get their pensions, which wouldn't have tanked. Let me ask you that. In a bankruptcy scenario like this, had Yellow held the pension of these workers, would they get that?
Yeah, generally the pension funds are held, as the ERISA money is separate, is not used by creditors. And so that's generally protected, although don't quote me, I'm not an expert on this field of
No, it's just that I've seen so many times when a company goes belly up, everyone who had a pension there now looking to the PBGC to try and cobble together a retirement because the company screwed them out of that. And I guess, I don't actually 100% know, but it just seems, well, I've heard this story before.
Yes. Yeah. And the multi-state fund is certainly debatable whether it has enough money or not to pay off their pensions, and maybe not. But it's just, people are looking for short-term, all these Wall Street finance guys come in with, bright colored ties, and they're thinking, we can bend the rules here and there and withdraw some money for ourselves, our management fees and stuff. And, who knows whether 10 years from now, there'll be enough money to pay the pensions of these guys driving the trucks. And it's just a form of greed, of finance guys getting ahead of the workers and just thinking that's okay because it's legal.
Yeah.
And putting, the letter of the law and their ability to bend the rules. And they actually believe that that's a perfectly ethical, moral thing to do, They don't think about other people. And it's just sad that that's what's happening to our country, No,
what's sad is, I go back to, the whole greed is good idea. And this idea that, there are all these gimmicks out there on how business should be done. And, maybe it's because it's personal to me and I actually worked for one of the companies that was involved in this. But they were a company, Roadway Express was a company that when Galen Roush founded the company, it was all about, they bought terminals, they bought their equipment, their tractors, their trailers. Now, granted, they ran them into the ground. It was like, when I buy a car, that thing, before I trade it in or get a new one, it's pretty much done. They did the same thing, but you knew that the company was solid. You knew that they were invested in it and the workers were invested in it. And then you had the Yellow model where they leased all of their terminals. They leased all the equipment. They had no real stake, to use a Republican frame, no skin in the game. So it's not surprising to me that when Yellow bought Roadway up and then bought up all of the other carriers they bought up, that they just ended up selling stuff off, just, basically selling the furniture to pay the mortgage.
And that's what happens when you go to business school. They'll tell you, oh, you run a capital light model. That Wall Street will be happier with that. Don't own restaurants, franchise them. Don't buy stuff, lease it. And then you don't need as much money. That's what I used to be. I used to work for a company called Kidder Peabody and Company. And then we were paid based on return on equity. And what was the solution to that? Have no equity, borrow more money. And then he had a great return on equity. Other people were taking the risk. And that's what, all of America's figured out by now, is that, no skin in the game means you get big returns when things work well. And sometimes they do. And sometimes they do for a few years. And sometimes they don't.
No, it's sad stuff. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Morris Pearl. Morris is the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires. Patrioticmillionaires.org, the website, if you want to take a look at the work that they do. I got to get your thought on this story, changing topics a little bit. Evidently, our credit rating has been downgraded, which, I thought the economy was doing okay. I thought we were moving in a good direction. But this Fitch organization, they have downgraded us from, I guess, the 3A to a 2A plus. I'm sure there's something there, but the reasons that they gave are interesting to me. They said that it's the deterioration of U.S. governance, as well as political polarization reflected partly by January 6th. And also, let's not forget all of the hostage situations of maybe we're going to pay our bills, maybe we're not. Maybe we'll crash the global economy, maybe we won't. Is this a big deal?
I don't think so. It doesn't really affect anything. It doesn't really affect the government's ability to deal with treasury bonds and notes and bills and things like that. So I'm not really worried about that in itself. I am worried about the underlying issue. What they're really saying, like, imagine by analogy, like if you had a credit card and then you and your wife were on such bad terms that you couldn't even have somebody bring the check to the post office box, because even if you had plenty of money you're checking out, you're just so discoordinated that you couldn't put the stamp on the envelope and everything to mail it in, and you ended up paying your bills the last minute. And that's kind of what Fitch is saying. It's like, you guys have the legal right to print money, so you can't really run out, but you have such discoordination between the different parts of the government, with the House and the Senate and the White House and the Treasury Department, all this, that we're just afraid you guys are just not going to pay, even though you can. And maybe they're right. We came very close. The fiscal year is going to end September 30th.
Yeah, September.
And who knows how they're going to get these guys to agree on a budget, come October. And I don't know what's going to happen.
So this is do you see this as just kind of a, hey, we're watching? Because, again, I don't know what all this means. I don't know if it's going to make, someone has said it's going to make our debt more expensive. Does this raise the cost of our borrowing money? Does this in any way, cost us more?
The Fed really determines what interest rates are. So no, this doesn't really affect interest rates. Nobody who's buying government bonds or thinking, oh, they used to be AAA Fitch, now they're AA plus. They're different from Moody's and S&P anyway. Those are the bigger ones, and they didn't even agree between themselves. I wouldn't worry about it as a thing unto itself, the AAA versus the AA plus, because investors consider U.S. Treasury in a separate category anyway. They're risk-free according to bank balance sheet regulations, so it doesn't even matter what the rating is. But yeah, I'd worry about the underlying issue that Fitch brought up, that our government is just not able to function properly, because every time something needs to be done, a few Congress people, or half of them or something, can say, oh, I'm not going to agree to do this unless you agree to whatever it is I want to do. And that's a tough way to run a country.
It is most certainly a tough way to go run a country. Every time we get to one of these artificial debt limits, It's always another episode of 24, the ticking bomb. Will we destroy the global economy, or will someone find sanity?
And the next one is the debt limit's going to run out again, like the week of the next presidential inauguration in January of 2025.
If only we had a functional government. But Morris, I appreciate the time as always. I appreciate you sharing some thoughts on the yellow situation. Got my question answered. Thanks so much.
Great to be in your show, Rick, and talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much, our good friend Morris Pearl. Make sure you check out their website, patrioticmillionaires.org. Quick break, right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's some interesting little tidbits for all of you Amazon fans. Federal inspectors again found ergonomic hazards, inadequate medical care, and other health risks, health and safety risks at the Amazon facility in Logan Township, New Jersey. And now remember, understand, OSHA has enough manpower to inspect every workplace in this country in just a little under 190 years. Let that sink in for a second. So the fact that there's some inspections being done, we find some things going on. What they've found is that the workers at this Amazon fulfillment center were exposed to multiple ergonomic hazards, and they went through quite painstakingly the number of things. They've proposed almost $16,000 in penalties because the fines just way too expensive. And this is the part that I'm always amazed at. You look at some of the fines that OSHA can give because they cap this stuff, and it's like, well, of course there's going to be horrible things going on. Of course, no one is going to address ergonomic claims, health and safety claims, if the penalties aren't there. Now remember, we're told carrot and stick kind of thing. Amazon has been. Research shown the warehouse workers there are injured at a higher rate than other warehouse workers, and this is one of those things because I actually worked for it was True Value hardware stores at the time. The company was Cotter and Company. They were the distributor for True Value hardware stores, and there was a union there. It was Teamsters. I was a member of Teamsters Local 293 in Cleveland, and we had committees, this is going back in the 80s, for health and safety, that if something was not right, the union made sure it was done. This is, again, my early years of seeing the companies and the unions butt heads was informative. That butting of the heads You know what that did? That protected people. That made sure people didn't get hurt on the job. And I look at Amazon. I think about my time in that warehouse and all of the things that could have happened and all of the corners that could be cut and all of the things that management really wanted to do but couldn't because there was a cop on the beat. There was a union steward there. You know, I tell the story all the time of one of the maintenance guys. He wasn't too bright. Nice guy, really nice guy, could fix anything, but was not very bright. Did exactly what he was told. And the manager at the time of the shop said, "Hey, go take that 55-gallon drum of oil and just go dump it out in the back." And even he's questioning, is that smart? Now, understand, the guys in the shop were not unionized. So as he's driving the giant barrel of oil through the facility, the steward stops him and goes, "Hey, where are you going?" And the guy goes, "Oh, I've been told I got to go dump this out in the back." And the steward almost lost his mind. If I remember right, actually took the guy's keys out of the tow motor and marched up to the terminal manager's office and said, "What the heck?" Long story really, really short, that oil didn't get dumped out in the back. And you go, well, that's a good thing, right? It's an absolutely great thing. One, showed you had a little power in the workplace, but two, saved the environment a little bit, but three, saved the company from itself because the company didn't even want to do that. It was this one manager who wanted to cut corners. And this is what we find in these warehouse settings. I talk to people who work in warehouses and freight all the time. The things that they're subjected to wouldn't happen in a facility that had a union. And this is why I am such a supporter. Why I think it's important that everyone has that contract that lays out the conditions under which they can toil and then gives them the ability to say no. I mean, there's nothing more powerful than being able to go, "No, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not going to take this unsafe vehicle on the road. No, I'm not going to do this unsafe thing that's going to not just harm me, not just hurt my family, but hurt the company as well. Hurt you and hurt your profits and hurt the facility." This is the part that I think most people seem to forget. And why I believe, every working person should be out there right now forming their union. What's coming is going to be catastrophic. When AI and robotics and all the automation hits, it's going to be catastrophic. It's going to be massive. And I look at the contracts that the Teamsters just negotiated with their freight division and with their package division. Both of them have language in there to protect workers from the future technologies. Have taken the cab facing cameras out. Have taken the surveillance out. This is important. These are important battles. And the longer this goes without anyone responding to it, the harder it's going to be to undo. Which again is why I look at the writers' strike and the Screen Actors Guild who are on strike. They're fighting a battle much beyond wages and hours. They're fighting a battle for the future of their craft, for the future of human workers. We should be involved in that as well. I want to hear your thoughts. What are your conditions? And do you have the ability to say, "I'm not going to do something that's wrong"? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day that became known in California as the Wheatland Riot. The Industrial Workers of the World, or Wobblies, were trying to organize hop pickers who worked near the city of Wheatland in Northern California. Living conditions for the hop pickers were rough. Durst Ranch was the largest agricultural employer in the state, hiring hundreds of seasonal farm workers each summer. The Durst workers slept in tents. The bathrooms were latrine ditches dug into the ground. The well water they drank was contaminated and foul. The Northern California heat was excruciating, with temperatures soaring above 100 degrees. And while the temperatures were high, the wages were unbearably low. On this fateful day, thousands of workers gathered to hear IWW organizer Richard Ford talk about calling a strike. In response, the local sheriff formed a posse to arrest Ford. During the arrest, one of the posse shot his gun into the air to disperse the crowd. Chaos erupted. Gunfire was exchanged. 4 people lay dead, including the district attorney, a deputy sheriff, a worker, and a young boy. Authorities blamed the IWW for the violence. Ford stood trial for causing the riot even though he had fired no shots. Another Wobbly organizer, who was not even there that day, was also tried for the events at Wheatland. Both received sentences of life in prison for second-degree murder. Today, an historic marker commemorates the site. It explains that the event, quote, focused public opinion for the first time on the plight of California's agricultural laborers and resulted in new state legislation to regulate labor camp conditions. A new state commission on immigration and housing was created to improve working conditions. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Little known fact, a leading cause of death in Texas is Governor Greg Abbott. Yes, by intentional actions and deliberate inactions, Abbott has used his gubernatorial policies to kill thousands of Texans, including his calculated refusal to extend health care to millions of poor Texans, including nearly 1 million children. His intentional denial of water breaks for outdoor workers broiling under this year's 100-degree-plus heat dome. His lethal deregulation of utilities, causing the state power grid to collapse for days in the deep freeze of 2021, with hundreds dying for lack of heat and water. And his shameful prioritizing of gun extremism over the lives of school children. These people are not dying accidentally, but are victims of Abbott's premeditated policies and political ambition. Consider his silly scheme of throwing $9.5 billion of Texas taxpayers' money into the ditch of his highly ballyhooed border security PR show. Grandiosely branded Operation Lone Star, it has posed Generalissimo Abbott as a right-wing border hero. Some hero, he has stretched miles of razor wire underwater in the Rio Grande, slashing the flesh of migrant families and trapping babies and pregnant women in the coils. And Abbott's state troopers have been commanded to shove exhausted and injured refugees back into the river toward Mexico. As one appalled trooper says, we have stepped over a line into the inhumane. This willful cruelty is made ridiculous by the fact that Abbott's militaristic power play has totally failed to deter migration. After all, these families are fleeing for their lives and future, so he can wrap all of Texas in razor wire and they will still come and find a way in. This is Jim Hightower saying Abbott can kill lots of them, but he can't kill the human spirit.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show.
So if you haven't
here
heard
is Rick
breaking
Smith.
news, breaking news today. Breaking news. Donald Trump pled not guilty. And our quote of the day comes from Billy Barr, former Attorney General, says, we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg on this. He said, I think there's a lot more to come, and I think they have a lot more evidence as to President Trump's state of mind. Telling he knew exactly what he was doing. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the breaking news. I'll get some insight from maybe a little different perspective. I've asked our good friend Sherry Jacobus to come talk with us. Sherry is a political columnist and former RNC spokeswoman. Sherry, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, former RNC spokeswoman, I know the second that the Republicans nominated him, you head for the exit, but
yes.
still, you were on that side of the aisle. This has got to be at least a little difficult, no?
Oh, no. I mean, I got over any sort of, tugs at the heartstrings years ago after the Trump stuff. But, even though after he was nominated, I had friends in the establishment. They were not Trump supporters. The establishment GOP did not want him, but they all had to preserve their positions as cogs in the wheel. And so they went along with it. And they're like, but he's going to lose and we're all going to come back together. And I'm thinking, nope, I can never trust these people again. This was not about policy. I was always called a rhino anyway. Sometimes I agree with Republicans and sometimes I agree with Democrats. It's always been that way. But I no longer trusted them as people to be good stewards of our government and to even do the right thing. You can disagree on policy, but I always thought we always had the same ultimate goal in mind, both sides. So yeah. I knew something had changed. So I haven't been a Republican for since the summer of 2016. Was that 7 years now? Gosh. Yeah.
Wow. But here's the thing, and it's interesting you bring this up because I ask the question all the time, which is worse, the true believer who wears the whole Trump outfit, or the person who's just in it because it's a gig and they know better, but they're doing it anyway. Which is worse?
They're both horrible in two different ways. The people who are doing it as a gig. I mean, look, a lot of people who were on Fox News back during the primary, and even when Trump was getting nominated, they would be sending me private messages about, they were not Trump people. They were alarmed. They were alarmed when their Fox News colleagues all of a sudden were jumping on the Trump bandwagon, and now they all are on board. And some of them, who, if they had a contract at another network, they'd probably be anti-Trump, but because they're at Fox, they're pro-Trump. So I certainly understand when you work for the party and you're doing a campaign, you can't agree with your candidate on everything, but as a political operative, you're there to get them elected or do their will. If there's something egregious that they stand for that you can't do, well, you can't work for that person. But this goes way beyond that. And I think we are well past a point where there's any excuse for anybody who's in politics and knows about this stuff to be a Trump person and all of a sudden then stop because maybe it's better for their career to stop. And we've seen a lot of that. People leave the administration and they write books. So it's not been a good era at all for Republicans anyway, and former Republicans.
No, former Republicans especially, because I talked to my friend Joe Walsh, who I still can't believe I say that, because when Joe was in Congress, he was one of my favorite chew toys. But the fact is that we both agree on saving democracy. We may not agree on anything else, but what happened on January 6th was well beyond the pale. It's something that has to be prosecuted, has to be punished. So I got to ask you, what do you think of today's breaking news? He pled not guilty. And what do you think of the charges?
See, I'm smiling ear to ear. So that tells you what I'm thinking about it. I was a victim of Trump's early on. I've been ringing the alarm about this guy for a long, long time. And some of us will never be made whole what he did to us as individuals. But at least we're finally coming to our senses as a nation. I mentioned to you before we came on, there was a poll that I wanted to bring up because I think it's really interesting and it gives me hope. That is not something I say often in this era of Trump, but a Reuters poll that they did, that they did it right up until, I guess, Trump, for 2 days, right up until Trump showed up at the courthouse. And they were asking Republicans, if Trump is indicted, if he's convicted by a jury of his peers, would you vote for him? And 45% of Republicans said no. Then they were asked, if he were serving time in prison for his crimes, would you vote for him? And at that point, you had 52% of Republicans said no. This is why you have Fox News pulling their hair out, Jesse Waters out there. They have nowhere to go with this. So they have got to make it seem, they can't say he didn't do what he did. And right. You mentioned Bill Barr said there's a lot more to come out. Once people start hearing the real evidence, if they're allowed to, Fox won't tell them the evidence, but once they hear the nitty gritty details, I'm not saying that they're going to get all of these Trump supporters, but you only need a few of them. And I say this all the time, closer elections are won or lost in those margins. So the people that are not really the cult, the people who are not on Twitter, older, white, watch Fox News, maybe aren't online at all, They don't really have all of the information. We found that with the Mueller report, which is why I did my project, America Reads the Mueller Report, to try and reach those people who were not part of the cult, but simply didn't have the information because of Bill Barr. Remember, he lied.
Right.
So it's important to find other ways to reach these people with the information, because Fox News is not going to. I hope the trials are televised. They should be. But if they're not, there has to be a coordinated, simple, clear way to reach, not to preach into the choir, because we're all going to be glued to this stuff, but the people who need to hear it who otherwise will not. They only watch Fox News. You got to get to them another way. And that's where Democrats need to be spending their money and their resources.
Oh, boy, do they. Something I've been saying for, let me see. Let me check the official watch. About 18 years now.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out. But you brought up the poll, and I saw that earlier. I saw it a little differently than you did. I saw it as, are you kidding me? 48% of people would vote for a Trump in jail? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know. But I look at it as a political strategist, like, okay, now we have the numbers. What do we do with them?
Right.
He can't win with, Trump can't win with that many people who won't vote for him. So look, Fox News and the people who are desperately trying to, hold on to their lives and livelihood by hanging on to Trump, they're going to do everything they can to shift those numbers too.
Yeah.
You can't deny that Trump did what he did, said what he did. He's on tape. They know that. So all they are saying is that it's not a crime. It's not a crime. And that's going to be harder for them to do. I think that even people who are still willing to vote for Trump just because he's got an R after his name, once they realize they may even decide for themselves, well, I don't care if it's a crime or not. He told us he didn't do it, or there's too much of this stuff, or that sounds kind of treason-y once you get to the documents case. So Bill Barr is telling us there's a lot more. For the first time ever, I might take his word out.
See, we're in such a weird moment, Sherry. I mean, or at least I'm in such a weird moment, because generally I don't take anything Bill Barr says as anything that I would trust. I'm in this world where people that for years I always found as distasteful and distrustful are now, Mike Pence is now being viewed as some great hero because he did the basic duties of his job. I'm in this weird spot because now we have to give these people credit for, at least in this moment, not being entirely completely horrible.
Oh, we have to grade on a curve. I know. I don't look at them as heroes. I mean, Mike Pence is doing this strategically. He could have come forward 2 years ago, or actually when it happened, and said the same thing. Somebody, when I was talking about this on either Threads or Twitter, somebody else said, yeah, but keep in mind, he also, when he called the Trump lawyers, the cranks or whatever they were, he might be trying to lay the groundwork to kind of let Trump off the hook, so that he can get some of these MAGA voters thinking Trump was out of the way anyway, but make MAGA happy by blaming the lawyers. You can say, well, Trump thought that there was all this fraud, and he thought he could do this because he had all these lawyers who said he could. And remember, all of these lawyers are the ones that are,
is that not going to be the defense, though?
Being indicted? Yeah. So, Pence might have been trying to help Trump with that, along those lines. But, you've got Mike Pence. He's not a hero to me. These people finally have to tell the truth because they have no choice. They're not heroes to me. A lot of these people that worked in the Trump administration and then leave and, they just didn't know, or they supported Trump until they didn't get the job they wanted, Solicitor General, whatever. And all of a sudden they don't support Trump anymore because they've seen the light. Joe Walsh is one of the people who is legit in this stuff. I certainly am, there's a lot of other people who are a little bit too late to the game, and they've done it to benefit themselves. Some now are doing it to keep out of prison themselves, to save their political careers. Other people did it before so they could get book deals and get on TV. And it's working for them. It's become very lucrative to switch sides and suddenly be against Trump, like, all that time I worked for him in a senior position in his administration, I just didn't know.
Yeah, all of them are now going to, all of them will claim to be the secret leaker writing the articles.
Well, and shame on the producers for putting them on the air, but TV is still showbiz. So in some ways, some things haven't changed. I see too, the people the media and some people who claim to be quote fighting Trump. See air quotes here. It's very lucrative, and they were saying, well, DeSantis is more dangerous. It's like, no, he wasn't. DeSantis is Jeb Bush without the personality, without the exclamation point. Remember Jeb? But these people wanted Trump as the nominee because that's how they get their super PAC money. They make money, and media wanted him. This is just like 2015 and 2016. It's very dangerous. And I just read today that former President Barack Obama told Biden, expressed concern that Trump as the nominee is a lot more dangerous than people think. But we're doing the same thing. So people who say, well, we want Trump as the nominee because he's easiest to beat. It's like, yeah, I remember everybody saying that in 2015. He's not. DeSantis would have been, but people didn't want DeSantis because then they don't get the super PAC money, so they can do the ads and they can't, have all the clicks, and they can't, I think cable news, all wanted that too. I'm not being negative Nancy here. I'm just giving it to you straight and I think people recognize this because we went through this before. And here we are in this place where, while I'm seeing the good in the poll because 52% who won't vote for Trump if he's in prison is, I guess, good. But to your earlier point, it's just really sad and disgusting that there are so many people who still would.
Yeah.
But many on our side are responsible for that, frankly.
The other side of this is, do you actually think he's going to be tried before the upcoming election? Do you think he's actually we're going to get to a trial and to a sentencing to put him in jail? I don't think he's going to get the trial. I think they're going to be able to draw this out. I'm no legal expert, but it seems to me there's enough ways to draw these things out that if he wants to, it's not going to happen until after the election.
I don't know. I hope that we at least get something. I think Jack Smith would like to move this along at a rapid clip after Merrick Garland dragged his feet, sat on his hands for a year too long or doing nothing, and that's again why we're in this situation. So we've got to have this trial. We'd like to have the TV cameras in the courtroom. I don't know if we will. This information does have to come out, and people do have to hear the evidence. I think that the reason that they did this as a standalone with Trump and didn't have all the other people indicted with him is because that would bog it down time wise. They did it like this because it's cleaner, and they also didn't. Jack Smith also didn't go for what was it, seditious conspiracy and that sort of thing. He's going for the things that are cleaner and less cumbersome and that can get done quicker, the obstruction and stuff like that. So there's some brilliance in that. It's unfortunate that Merrick Garland didn't have that same brilliance or didn't care to have it. Remember, a year ago this time, it was a January 6th committee who also got started kind of late. And Adam Schiff was warning Garland, say, don't wait for us. You go first. This is unprecedented that you wait for the committee to do it. And Merrick Garland didn't even know about Cassidy Hutchinson. I mean, so thank goodness for the January 6th committee, because we wouldn't be here. And also with the documents case down in Mar-a-Lago, remember, Merrick Garland actually dithered around and couldn't decide for a couple, for several weeks. And we may never have even known about this. And we know that it's placed our national security at great risk. Remember how we found out that there was a raid? It was by Trump. Trump was still in control of the narrative. And people have to really appreciate that a little bit more and pay really close attention to how he is able to still control things, even though he's the guy who's indicted.
Oh, no, I've been saying this all along.
Yeah.
I've been saying this all along. I mean, every time he's about to be indicted, he's saying, look, they're going to indict me, and I'm doing this for you. I'm going to take this indictment for you because this is about you. I mean, he is a master at... Look, I mean, he played the New York media for years as a real estate mogul. He knows how to play the narrative. He knows how to spin things. He's one of those guys who believes there's no such thing as bad press, and he's showing us that he can control the narrative, and he's good at it. I mean, It's bad for democracy. It's bad for the country, but he's actually really good at it.
Yeah. Well, I remember when they were trying to get me to work for them, and Corey Lewandowski told me he was the first campaign manager for Trump, told me in like May, June of 2015 to try and entice me, he said that Trump has had Roger Ailes and Jeff Zucker in his back pocket. And of course, I didn't believe it at the time. Turns out it was true. We had no idea, but he didn't just control the narrative and play the New York media all those decades. He also played law enforcement. Law enforcement in New York and federal law enforcement let him get away. Well, federal law enforcement in New York as well as state law enforcement, they let him get away with his stuff. He owned a lot of judges. He knows how to pay off lawyers. He knows how to control the legal system. And so far, it's still working for him because he's not behind bars, and he is tied with President of the United States. He's tied with Joe Biden in the polls. This is nuts. So I'm glad about today, but we're still in pretty big danger with this guy. It was significant, and Barack Obama knows it, and he was telling Joe Biden. So maybe he should have gotten out there a little sooner and said it. I wish that Obama would have been more vocal and let people know that, knock it off with this DeSantis is going to be more dangerous than Trump. And DeSantis is a really bad candidate. He's Scott Walker. He's Jeb without the exclamation point. I'm waiting for the please clap line to come from him. So there are forces who pretend to be on our side who, in fact, wanted Trump, not really because they knew or cared if he was easier to beat, but this is how they make a lot of money.
It's the horse race. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. It's was it Les Moonves who said it? It may not be good for the country, but it's good for the company. They're making tons of money.
Yeah, good for CBS, good for the media. Well, it's great for some of these super PACs out there. It's great. It's launched some media careers. It's selling books. And I remember saying this on CNN and got really attacked for it. It was I think it was towards the end of 2015 when we were all perplexed. Why were all these Fox News personalities jumping on this Trump bandwagon in a primary with 15 people in the primary? Certainly we expected Fox to go for whoever was the Republican nominee, and the others would go for the Democrat. But it was so confusing to see this in a primary with this buffoon. And I said it on the air. I said, look, a lot of these people, they think that if Trump is the Republican nominee, they think it ensures that Hillary Clinton will win the White House. And a lot of these people made their fame and fortune the first time there was a Clinton in the White House, and they want that again. So it was that same dynamic. Now, those same people were able to turn it around and keep making money off Trump, and a whole lot of other people on the other side, make a lot of money fighting Trump. So they need to have Trump as the guy to fight.
No, that is an excellent point. That is an excellent point. It really is about the money. But Sherry, I appreciate you taking time, sharing some thoughts, and I wanted to share in your happiness on this day.
Yay!
Thanks so much.
And hopefully we'll have more in Georgia real soon.
We'll see. Sherry Jacobus, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much. As always, great stuff. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. We'll talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1821. That was the day Uriah Smith Stevens was born near Cape May, New Jersey. Although he longed to be a Baptist minister, he worked as a tailor's apprentice and taught school. In 1845, he moved to Philadelphia. There, he became a member of the Garment Cutters Association in 1863, until it dissolved in 1869. From there, he joined several other garment cutters to form a new union. They called themselves the Knights of Labor. It was originally a secret secretive labor organization. Stevens' appreciation for religious ceremony infused the young union, which functioned like a fraternal order. Stevens took the title of first Master Workman of District Assembly 1 in the group. The organization would accept every worker, regardless of country of origin, race, religion, or trade affiliation. In fact, almost everyone was welcome to join, except for liquor dealers, lawyers, bankers, and professional gamblers. The Knights grew from just 9 members in 1869 to more than 9,000 by 1878. That year, Stevens became the Grand Master Workman, the top position in the organization. He soon resigned that position to become more involved in politics, but his organization continued to grow. It became the first national union to effectively organize across job types. In the 1880s, the union left behind its secrecy and became involved in the fight for the 8-hour workday. When the Haymarket tragedy occurred in Chicago, the Knights of Labor were caught up in the public backlash against organized labor. Although the group had no direct ties to Haymarket, its numbers plummeted. But the spirit of broad-scale worker organizing would live on in the United States, with organizing efforts such as the IWW and the CIO. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, Florida. I can't say Florida anymore without laughing. But, here's the thing. It's nothing to laugh at. They're doing some, not just crazy Florida man stuff anymore. They are leading the country in, let's figure out how to destroy education. In indoctrinating children. Now, remember, you got the folks down there who are, we're going to take on the woke agenda. And we're going to replace it. I don't even know what the woke agenda is, to be honest with you, but we're going to take it on, they say. I guess woke is, what was their definition? Being aware that there are inequalities in society and wanting to do something about it. And if that's the definition, I'm on board with that. But here's the thing. The Department of Education there don't want to actually teach history. And we've talked about in the past some of the rewriting of some of, especially Black history, that they have done. Now we find out that the Florida Department of Education, they've gone right on ahead and approved a new educational series. This is one of those things that's almost laughable. If you've ever seen the PragerU videos, Dennis Prager, the right-wing mouthpiece, they do. I got to be honest. You got to give the right credit. They do create content with the intent to indoctrinate, and not just children, their parents and their grandparents as well. But evidently, the Florida Department of Education has reviewed PragerU Kids and determined the material aligns to Florida's revised civics and government standards. They say PragerU is no different than many other resources which can be used as supplemental materials in Florida schools at district discretion. It goes on to say PragerU Kids did not submit a bid to be included in the 2023 instructional materials adaptation of social studies. The list of adapted materials is available on the instructional materials page on the department website. Now, for those of you who've seen Prager's Song and Dance, it's they take a kernel, like all good propaganda, and then they go to the extreme. Say the same thing about Jordan Peterson or any of the other right-wing mouthpieces. They take a kernel that I agree with, and then they explode it into go, wow, how'd you go there? Same kind of thing here. You've got now a talk show host who is taking their beliefs and wanting them to be indoctrinated into the Florida school districts. And we're not going to call that grooming? Interesting stuff. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Anything like this happening in your neck of the woods? Want to hear it? Miss any of the program? Grab the podcast. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.